Did you hear anything? Oh. Am I showing it?
Okay, I see that it's 8 o'clock, so I think we should get started. Thank you, Richard, for sending the Zoom and creating the Zoom. One of the things that we talked about at the last meeting was recording of our meetings, and I don't know that we came up with any conclusions, but before we go forward, we probably should make a decision about that. I mean, this is being recorded on Zoom, but did you have some other points you were making, Richard?
So there are two ways of archiving the meeting. One way is just to live stream it on YouTube, which is easier because it's available like as the meeting is going, it live streams, and then it just automatically creates a permanent record. The other is to record it on Zoom as we're doing, because I don't have the account information for the Block Association YouTube and Google account. So I'm going to get a recording of this, which I can upload. It's just a more involved process. And either way, I'll still need the username and password so I can upload the recording.
Well, we don't have a YouTube account or a Google account.
We
Oh,
do.
someone had said that we do.
We do have a Google account, and I can get you that information.
That'd be great.
What do
One
we
question
use?
I had about it is, if we go the route of the YouTube broadcast or whatever, does that make it us more vulnerable to someone Zoom bombing or anything like that?
We're still doing the meeting on Zoom, so this is completely unchanged. The YouTube is just an add-on where it would be sending a signal from Zoom to YouTube to live stream. So if anything, it could make us less vulnerable because we could only, if we chose to, and this is completely discretionary, but if we wanted to make the meeting open to the public, but for view only, we could give out the YouTube link, but not give out the Zoom link. And that way the Zoom is completely protected. So that's one option for how to give public access to the meetings. If we do want the public to be able to participate in the meetings, there are other security ways of having public access to meetings, which are more involved. I don't think we want to get into that now. But either way, we'd still be meeting on Zoom, but YouTube would be a secondary stream and then archive.
And it's in real time, right? So as it's happening,
Yeah, there's a few second delay, but yeah,
Okay.
It's real time.
And if we chose at a given meeting to go into executive session, we can just cut off the YouTube stream.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now I don't understand the difference. I thought you said we had a Google account. That's not YouTube.
Yes, it is. Google owns YouTube.
Oh, okay. Well, that clarifies that. Now, the other thing is, these are our board meetings, and we've always allowed, when we have in-person board meetings, we've always had the opportunity for people to come to our board meetings. This isn't for, Chinatown area. This is a Block Association board meeting. We don't need it to be public for, the people who live in, the Battery Park, because this is just about our Block Association. So I'm not sure that, we need to make it that much more public. I think making it available for the residents of the Block Association makes sense, and that would be a use for having it on YouTube. But I'm not quite sure why we want to make this, it's not a city council meeting or anything like that.
I can guarantee you that people in Chinatown don't care to sit through this meeting.
Unless we talk
I mean-
about a Chinese restaurant on the corner.
Even so, I think if we're doing anything newsworthy enough that people outside of the block, let alone people on the block, care to watch, we're potentially doing something right.
I guess
but-
my point is just, it seems like it's a lot of extra stuff. And I'm not sure that it's, there's that much of a point, but if people want to do it, it seems fine to me.
I mean, just since I've been involved in like the month, there have been questions about what has been discussed, and just having an archive is really handy.
That's what I think is the real value. That we could go back and look at old meetings, or anyone could go back and look at old meetings. I think Richard just ducked under the table or something.
I think it'll be very useful to have these things archived, even if they're not widely used by people beyond our circle.
All right, so let's take a vote, and how many think we should go ahead and pursue the Google YouTube account for our meetings? I guess raise your hands. Celia, can you see everybody to do a count? Well, it looks like it's unanimous.
Everyone who's visible.
Who said no? Did anybody say no?
Celia, you're on mute. I saw your lips move, but I couldn't hear you.
I'm trying to get off mute. Okay, I'm off now.
Yes, you are.
I don't see anyone saying no.
Correct.
Okay, very good. All right, so it passes. So then the next thing is for, I guess, Amy and Richard to talk to make it happen, okay, with the account number and password, et cetera, okay?
Yeah, so for this meeting, we're recording it on Zoom, so I'll get an MP4 file, which I can download and then upload to YouTube. For subsequent meetings, we'll just stream the meeting. And if we want, we can publicize the link, so anyone who's interested can tune in and watch it on YouTube.
Okay, actually, I'm going to jump to number 8 because Ray Dooley from St. Luke's Halfway House has inquired whether we want to do in-person meetings again at St. Luke's. And if we were to do that, how would we do the YouTube stuff?
So if it's in person, what I would recommend is still conducting the meeting on Zoom. And the people in the room would be on one camera, and anyone who's not in the room. That way, people who might be out of town but want to still join could join on Zoom. We'd have to figure out if there's a screen there that could be used, and we'd need a camera that we can use just to show the room and use it to record the meeting.
Could we also just simply use a laptop computer to film it?
Yes. Yeah, so the laptop would be connected to Zoom. We'd need a camera. Now you could use the laptop's camera, but that's awkward because it's facing the wrong direction. You can also use a portable camera.
I mean, there are only 8 of us or so that at the meetings typically, and so if we sat on 2 sides of a table and at the other end, and Cynthia was at the other end of the table, we would be able to pick up people pretty easily.
Yeah, I would say I'm open to any help, but it's something I can, like, I don't know if it's worth all of us talking through it. I'm happy to talk offline, but we can make it work.
Okay, well, I was thinking it probably wasn't something we would do until the fall anyway, but I know that they're interested, and it does seem if we can do in-person things, it is sometimes helpful. So
The biggest question would be whether there's internet access available. Do they have Wi-Fi that we could use to access the internet.
I'm pretty
That's
sure
just
they
what I
do.
was going to speak to, is I know they do have internet back in the dining room where we usually meet. It's been a little, the last time we were there, which granted is several years ago, it wasn't terrific. So if in fact we are going to go ahead with that, we may want to volunteer to cover the cost of upgrading their internet service.
Well, we should probably try it out first, and I think
Yeah, we can test it out. Also, if there's cell service, I could just do a hotspot from my phone. We can figure that all out.
Okay, so I think that's a project for over the summer. Okay, so let's move on then to the consent calendar. We sent around the minutes. Celia, thank you for that. Any additions to Celia's notes? And the treasurer's report was sent around. Kamal can't make it tonight, or she didn't think she'd be able to because she's actually traveling for work. But Gary, is there any addition to what was sent?
no, I think it fairly presents the financial status. The current, the past month, May, was a bit of a transition month because, for one thing, we're beginning to get some of the contributions in for people who are having ads in the next newsletter, and then the costs for the next newsletter are going to come out of next month's and or this month's, depending on when the newspaper goes out. So it's probably not representative of the long-term situation. We have a few more people's contributions for their ads still to get recognized this month in it, et cetera. The good news is that we managed to settle our problem with the signing authority,
Oh, wonderful.
thanks to Celia's hard work on this, and Cynthia's as well, to dig up actually the materials, the original incorporation materials for the organization. This is not the time to discuss it, but I want to put on the table an issue, which is that it appears that that the organization is a 501c4 organization, and 501c4 organizations are somewhat. If I read the information that's on the government sites on that, they're somewhat different than 501c3s. One big difference is that you can't get credit from income tax credit for your contributions to the organization. I don't know how many people are claiming them now, but that is an issue, and I would suggest that at some point it's probably worth revisiting that question of whether it should be a 501c3 or a 501c4.
My understanding of that, going back to the last time we talked about that, is that I believe that because the bulk of our budget has historically been spent on providing guard service, it doesn't qualify as a C3. It doesn't fall into the right category for an organization that would qualify for tax deductible status.
Well, I've certainly been part of 501c3s that have spent their money on things like that, so I'm not sure. But
I think if it's a project like beautification or
solve it tonight, but I think we're also going to take another look at the bylaws of the organization, and at some point I'm suggesting that we revisit that issue because in fact a lot of people who are making contributions are foregoing benefits, tax benefits from it.
All right, so why don't we, Gary, if you can keep looking into that, I'll ask around as well for some input from some of the accountants I know. So, and if anybody else has any connections and can ask for more information, that would be helpful.
Cynthia, David Reich told me that it was a 501c4. At least 10 years ago, he told me that. And so he may have some background information on that.
All right, I can ask him for more about why we took that pathway, although I remember there was decision about it and a discussion and then a decision. So there's probably a good reason for it, but let's see what we can find out. But at least Gary is able to sign some checks
Yes,
so we can spend money.
we're up to date.
Hello, Gary and I spoke to the bank officer on May 25th. And that's when he was granted access to the account.
Good. All right, well, thank you for taking care of that. All this annoying red tape. And then there's the BAIP report that I think we circulated. Leilani Straw is sending it to me, and then I send it to the board. Any comments on that? Additions?
I would like to make a brief comment. I sat in on that meeting about the Omni card. And that's all I have to say. I liked it. It was a good meeting. That's all I have to say.
Okay, all right, so let's take a vote to approve the consent calendar. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Wait, I'm sorry,
Any opposition? I don't see any, so agenda item number 1 is taken care of. Let's move on to newsletter, and I added the advertising report here too, because I know Terrence has been working on that. So I think he may be on this. Oh, there he is. Hi, Terrence.
Hi,
So-
can you guys hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay,
we'll start with Hetty first, and then she can take over, turning it over to you.
thanks.
Okay. The newsletter is on the verge of being copied and then distributed. We were almost ready to go and then decided that we would pause because we thought it was very important to use the newsletter as a vehicle for publicizing the upcoming mediation meeting. And we didn't want to publish it either saying that it already happened when it was scheduled for tomorrow, or not saying anything. So we realized that we just needed to wait until that got sorted out. So the way we've handled that in the newsletter is that on the front page, right up near the logo, Ariana is still working on the graphics part of this. We will be referring readers to, I think it's page 6, where there is an article announcing the meeting, although we don't have a meeting date to announce. But it tells readers to please check our website and sign up for our email list so they can receive an update that way, and what the background is and why the meeting is important and such like that. We are at 10 pages and we have a lot of varied content. And Amy, did you have anything you wanted to say before we have Terrence speak to advertising?
No, I think you covered it. I think it's a good issue. I always think it's a good issue, but this one has some fun things in it, some interesting things.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for me before I pass to Terrence?
I guess I'm curious about how you describe the mediation, given that Richard and I still have questions about the mediation.
That the purpose of the meeting is to
I'll have
find
to read the
some
article.
common ground between those in favor of the Open Streets project and those who are opposed. And it includes contact information for resource information for how to learn more about it. And it includes the Upper West Siders for Parking contact info and the Facebook page, as well as the Open Streets website. It's not a position-taking article. It's just the facts, ma'am, kind of a.
Very good. Thank you.
Terrence, you had something you wanted to talk about ad-wise?
I just want to share what I believe is pertinent, which is we're achieving about $1,000 revenue per quarter or per issue to offset the cost of producing the issue. Sometimes we get a new advertiser, sometimes we lose one. I'll point out one that unfortunately went away after a number of years preceding my activity with the newsletter sales. So I'm just going to hold it up. You guys might know James Perez.
Yeah.
Right? And he's advertised with us since like forever. And there are changes in the real estate market because of increased interest costs and other factors. So who knows why James decided to stop. On a positive side, we have that new half-page ad coming from the people also in real estate, which might explain why James dropped out. I don't know. We have at least 3 real estate agents in the newsletter. But the one from Keller Williams, which is a half-page ad, it's pretty dominating. They pay well, and that goes to offset the loss of the Perez ad. So that's really it. Some up, some down. I continue to approach new potential clients, and I'm open to your input as to others I might try to get.
Thank you, Terrence.
Yeah, thanks. That's good. So far we're doing pretty well on that. We talked about the recording. So we have 2 points of discussion that I don't think we can get. I think we need to just begin the process on. One is the bylaws review. So I kind of feel like we should have a committee of people who look through the bylaws and make suggestions and bring it to the full board, either through emails back and forth or at a board meeting with some suggestions or concerns. So does that seem like a good plan to set up a little mini committee rather than have a whole board meeting spent on on the bylaws?
I thought we had decided that last meeting and there were a few people who had shown interest. I
Did we
think
pick people?
and Mary, I can't remember who else, but it's worth asking again. I did want to add that I'm in contact with Lynn Elliott, this lawyer who lives in our neighborhood, who volunteered to look them over. She was traveling quite a bit in May, and I emailed her again last week and she said she was turning her attention to it. So hopefully there'll be some information from her fairly soon. And if we have a committee, I can connect her up with those people and maybe she can be a guest at a meeting or send her thoughts or whatever works out for people.
That sounds good. So who was showing interest at the last meeting? I've kind of lost track of that. So Amy, you were interested, right? And I guess Lynn Elliott. Who else was?
I had volunteered.
Herb, okay.
And
I think I had.
Who was
This
that?
is where we need a recording.
Well,
Richard.
Celia's been the excellent minute taker, but I don't know that we got commitments last time. So did somebody else just say Amy and Herb? Did somebody else volunteer?
Yeah, Rich.
Eddie?
Richard, and Mary had shown interest. I can ask her again if she's still interested.
Okay.
Hello, I am sorry to say I made some errors in describing Mary's comments during the meeting. So I've tried to make them more consistent with what she indicated in the email. And Cynthia has a revised version of the minutes. So if anyone has questions about that, it's being taken care of. And yes, Mary it seemed that way, but I don't know. I can't speak for her.
Okay, well, at least we have a few people committed. So Amy, Herb, Richard, possibly Mary, and Lynn Elliott. So do you want to try to figure out a time, or do you want to do that through emails? The trouble, we just want to make sure that we actually get started meeting on it. I mean, this isn't something that has to be done, you know, immediately, but if we don't set up a first committee meeting, we may never set up a first committee meeting.
So why don't you just appoint somebody as a chair?
Okay, Amy, you want to be chair?
No, no, thank you.
All right. Herb, you want to be chair? You're good.
I'll do it. It's just, I need to be connected with Lynn Elliott, I guess.
Yeah,
Jen?
I can facilitate that. I'll get her in to the, if we just
She
do,
lives in your building, is that?
no, she's in the neighborhood. I think what we could do is just do an email trying to set up a first meeting,
I'll
and
be fine.
I'll get her email address. I haven't gotten her, I have not asked her to be on a committee. I only asked her to look at the bylaws. So let me talk to her and see what her time is like.
Okay. I mean, you know, this initially came up when we were trying to figure out how we do nominations and voting. So I'm sure there are other soft spots in our bylaws, but that is something that we definitely want to clarify the process. So that should be on, you know, one of the items that we deal with. Okay, the next one was the discussion about if we don't pay for a guard service, do we want to consider reducing the dues, or what do we want to think about that? And you know, I don't know that we've completely decided about the guard service. We don't have a good option for a guard service. So in some ways, we're not collecting money to pay for that. But one of the concerns was if we were to drop it and then at some point get a guard service, would we have to go back to the members and say, we now need to raise the dues again? So, and then as somebody else, maybe it was Gary, was suggesting that, you know, we could use the money for you know, more newsletter or a bigger newsletter, but also we may want to consider having it having a fund if we do a yard sale block fair kind of thing. And we could, even though the idea is that vendors contribute to the cost of the sale, and it can be a fundraiser in that way, but sometimes we may want to spend a little more in order to raise a little bit. So that may be a reason to keep the dues as they are. I know that Hetty's been thinking about this for a little while, but does anybody want to draw any conclusions today, or should we just hold off and make a decision about changing the cost of the dues to another meeting? Hetty?
I think that until we make a decision about whether we are going to reinstitute guard service, which I think will depend a lot on whether we get a volunteer who's willing to do the legwork to identify a service and all the stuff that has to be done, that leaving the contributions as is sensible. That when we get to a point where we say, you know, we're not doing this, then we have to change our direction. That's my opinion.
Eddie's sentiment. I don't see a strong need to change the dues element, especially since we might reinstitute it or make some other announcement in the future. And we reserve the right to figure that out.
Also, I mean, I think in the newsletter, we've been pretty above board about the fact, you know, that we suspended it and why, and it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone when they're getting ready to donate that maybe the money isn't going for that at this point. And we do want to reserve the opportunity to maybe do a bigger event, spend more on Halloween, spend more on spring party if we do it, or have some other events where we could use the money in other ways.
Okay.
I think there's actually going to be some drop off just naturally because people don't, people who know that it's been largely used for the guard are going to, you know, have second thoughts about whether they keep contributing the full amount each year. We had a significant drop in the number of membership contributions last month. Although I understand that the big wave of them comes after the newsletter because the envelopes are in the newsletter and the names are in the newsletter and so on. So a 1 month drop is not something that you have to assume is a trend on it. But we will know over the next couple of months whether there's any drop or not, just naturally.
Okay. The next item, Amy reminded me that, or us, that questioning about the thank you notes that we approved at the last meeting. So one was to Mark Schneiderman, but what I would like to do, so the first thing is that no thank you notes have been sent. So for Mark, I would like to thank him for the spring, for purchasing and providing the plants for the Block Association spring planting. It's not for the open streets planting, even though some of them were used for that. But as we were having our Block Association spring planting event, and it just happened to coincide with the bigger event from Open Streets. So I think we should send him a thank you letter specifically for the flowers that are in the 102nd, 103rd Street Block Association tree wells.
Second.
All in favor?
I agree. Could I add the suggestion that we send him some photographs as well of the event?
Yeah, I don't know if we have any.
I think Peter was taking some, wasn't he?
Oh,
Peter?
we do have, I mean, the newsletter got a bunch. We couldn't publish all of them, but we do have some.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Can I just ask who, Cynthia, are you going to write that and send it, or do you want someone else to draft
Well,
it?
The thing is, I mean, I don't mind drafting it. My problem is I don't have a letterhead.
Who has the letterhead?
I mean, Hetty, you've got letterhead, right?
I would have to check on my hard drive, which I'm not near at the moment. If I don't have actual letterhead, I can make it. So yes,
I believe I do. Just give me a day to check my files, but I believe I do because I used to send out letters of request for donations to film companies that were filming on our blocks, etc. I believe I do have it.
Okay, well, so if either of you could send it to me, then and I will try to store it this time, so that, or whatever the word is, save it, so that I have it for future letters.
Okay,
So then
Terrence,
the
why
other-
don't you CC me if you get to it first, and I'll CC you if you get to it first, if I get to it first.
Very good. Thanks.
And then maybe a couple good photos, but I don't know how, if you could send those in an attachment to me.
So I have a lot of photos. I'm happy to contribute them. And also, I had also related, asked that we thank Terrence for watering all these plants after they were planted.
Right. Terrence, thank you for watering all these plants.
Thank you, Terrence.
Thank you, Terrence.
Thank you, Terrence.
Shouldn't we vote on whether we thank Terrence?
Yeah, that's right. But I also was thinking about
I
Eliza. and
oppose.
Jim. What about Eliza and Jim? They got all of the,
job.
we were for getting, setting it all up, right?
Oh, she coordinated it.
Right, so,
So while you're
Do-
writing letters, drop a
do you
little
want me to
note
write one to
to
her?
Eliza saying, thanks for doing it.
And can you include their contact information? I mean,
Yes. I
okay,
can
now
just
the
give
other
it
note,
to you right now if you want it. But I
what would I
can
do with it? I mean,
write
you're
it
gonna
down on a
email
piece of paper.
it? No,
No, we don't do that anymore.
email it.
Okay.
You know, one
Um,
thing I'll share just from our experience on the board for many years is that we've gone out and planted flowers in the springtime every year. And it seems like we always catch this little micro drought right after we do it. So it requires watering. And I guess that's what gives me the impetus to do it. If we had decent rain, I wouldn't do it.
But it's
Well,
all,
the plants are getting watered now. Was Terrence responsible?
can't each of us take the responsibility of making sure our buildings, who wash the streets, can water these things every day? I mean, we did with our building at 878, and Eddie's out there every day watering it, and it shouldn't be a big deal to get a lot of the frontages handled by the buildings that occupy them.
Right, although, yes, in my building, even though we don't have that many plants, our doorman religiously washes everything every morning and waters the plants. But some buildings aren't as invested in our plants. I mean, I think, Terrence, your building tends to have a love-hate relationship with those tree wells, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, I'm the guy that's doing it, and Anthony Belov when he's in town, and that's about it.
but at least they're not breaking up the actual Costello additions to this. Well,
Yeah, and we-
one is completely gone, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, one of the people that lives in our very building, an adult, sat on one of Costello's creations. And because it isn't, meant to be sat on, the thing collapsed. So if you look at 865 West End, the center tree well looks like a collapsing piece of art in motion. And this is unfortunately due to an adult in our building. The other one got knocked out by virtue of garbage disposals, and we lost a tree right in front of the doorway. So we're working on getting those situations rectified with the Department of Environmental Protection. We put in requests for new trees. We'll see what happens.
Okay, so
I
now
also, I also just want to add, Park to Park volunteers have also participated in watering, and the sorriest tree bed of them all was at 116 West 102nd Street. And we all planted that as well with Eliza and our youth ambassadors. So, and that unfortunately has been neglected again, despite our talking to the building owners. So there was a lot done on 102nd Street, and we participated in all of that. Just want everybody to know.
but 160 isn't in our block association. You
No,
must be-
I said 116.
No, but it has to be a 2.
Oh, maybe it's 162.
No,
Terrence, do you know?
216 or 260.
262. Okay. It's on the Broadway to West End block. I can send you a
Okay.
picture.
Right. Has to start with a 2.
Okay.
So that's the 200 block.
Yeah, it'd be probably 262. Thank you.
Okay, so now the other note that was of concern was sending it to DOT, thanking them for the planters that have been put in. So I think we did approve sending a letter, but a couple people were concerned was whether that was thanking them for the start of the conversion of the open streets park to park.
Why don't
I just say a word? I'm sorry. This is
I'm the
really
one who
silly.
objected. Let's let it go.
This
One
is
at a time.
silly and
I'm sorry,
childish
Gary.
what you're doing. The people from DOT put planters out there. Every morning I walk by them. I smile because we have some lovely plants on that block. And here we are debating whether to thank them for that. I thought we had agreed that we were going to do it.
We did agree. We agreed. There were some people who didn't agree, but we voted and the vote said to thank them. And Peter drafted, he made a draft of it, he sent it around, and then nothing happened. So
When did he draft? I don't think I ever saw a draft.
can you send it again, Peter? And then the only question is if there are people who want to change the language in the draft. I don't think, I think it was very benign. I think it thanked them for beautifying the street and for the Horticultural Society for taking care of them, if I'm right.
All right, so
It
Why don't
was
we
sent,
thank-
it was sent to,
I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
I was saying, I'm gonna put it in the chat. I sent it to everybody.
And what I was saying is I'm the one who objected and I withdraw my objection and just, this is not something worth fighting about. It was just a concern that I expressed the last meeting. Let it go.
Thank you, Herb.
You're welcome.
okay, so can you send that in an email again, Peter, and then I can put it on the letterhead?
Of course.
All right, so I think we went through most of those points. The next one and last one is about the mediation plan. Let me just go over a couple things.
Excuse me, Cynthia, forgive me for interrupting you. Before we get into that topic, I realized that I neglected to include one thing in the newsletter report. We've had 2 retirements of distributors, one quite some time ago and one just very recently. One is the person who distributes along West End Avenue, along 102nd Street between West End and Riverside. And the other mainly has to do with the small townhouses on 102nd Street between Broadway and West End, with one exception. There's one batch that goes to one of the townhouses on 103rd between Riverside and West End. And I've put it in the help wanted in the newsletter, but if any of you, either yourself or is aware of somebody who would be willing to take on what really amounts to an hour 4 times a year to pick up a batch of newsletters, if it's somebody in a doorman building, they can be delivered to that doorman. If the person doesn't have a doorman, Eliza and I have a system where she just leaves things with my doorman for other people to pick up, which is fine with my building. But we need 2 new human beings if we can identify them. I'm done. Thank you. Sorry.
So this newsletter will be without that. unless we were to get somebody in the next week or so.
Correct. I've been doing the West End to Riverside on 102 distribution for quite a while. Maybe it's a year already. And I only just found out about the other one, and if need be, I'll take care of it if we cannot identify somebody quickly.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to the mediation meeting. I just wanted to go over how it evolved. There was so much controversy between several opposing groups that Gail Brewer, and she was receiving endless comments from both sides, assuming there were just two sides. So that she suggested we reach out to a mediation group known as the Peace Institute. And she and I and Max, the director at CB7, met and talked over a potential plan. The plan was that we wanted to give more people an opportunity to hear the real plan from DOT itself, since a lot of people weren't able to attend the community board meetings when it was approved. And then also for DOT to hear the concerns, the pros and the cons from in sort of an organized fashion, rather than just with petitions and protest votes and protest activities. So, so our thought was that we would start off with we called it a town hall at that point, although now I think we're calling it more like a listening session, a larger group meeting where the initial information would be given, and the different sides could state their concerns, and then there would be next steps. We would have follow-up meetings established by the people who want to be involved, smaller groups, to do more potential compromise or potential agreement, a consensus, I guess, in follow-up meetings. They could be smaller meetings with just, a few stakeholders meeting and trying to resolve the differences, if that could be resolved. And so the first session was to be more of a information meeting, and for clarity too. And then for a listening session. So our initial problem was figuring out, actually when we first began, we thought it would be really easy to get a venue where we could have an in-person event that might also have Zoom capabilities as well. And we pursued, a number of, Max did a lot of the legwork on that, talking to the schools, talking to the churches in the neighborhood, talking to any place that was ADA accessible and also had the ability to provide a meeting space. We ran into hurdles all the time. And actually, as you remember at our last meeting, one of the concerns was the synagogue was interested, but they wanted to charge a rental fee, and the Peace Institute doesn't have money. So that was a little bit of a stumbling block, but then the Block Association voted that we would pay the cost of that rental space. So we thought we were moving forward. We came up with a date of May 30th, but then there was concern that that was too close to the holiday, Memorial Day weekend. And then we ran into all kinds of things of people not being informed well enough in advance, which I take a little bit of responsibility for, because even though the Peace Institute is organizing this all, they weren't really doing some of the outreach about telling people. So apparently, I think they thought I was the one who was going to tell everybody about what the meeting, when the meeting was and where it was. So, so it ran into problems. And the latest decision that the Peace Institute and I have made is that we're going to have it, we're going to move it to try to do it in early July. One of the dates that seems to be working for a lot of people would be July 6th. So I wanted to throw that out as a possible date. You can think about whether that could work. DOT would be present for it. We still have to clarify that the synagogue is available on the 6th. Oh, that's the other thing, that the person that we've been using as our contact at the synagogue, it was out for a little while, and so we didn't have access to him. And then also CB7 got too busy with a million other things that they're doing this month. So they kind of dropped the ball in helping us organize. So let me go through what I think the plan would be. Peace Institute would be moderating. They're the ones who are organizing this whole event. They will send out the notices about it, the flyers and so forth. We would ask people to, and we're going to clarify that this is a listening session, that there would be a panel of DOT, and then Peter Freishoff, or anybody he wants from Open Streets, Maxine or Herb or somebody from the parking group, and then possibly CB7 to talk about what went through at that initial meeting, but I don't know that we even really need CB7 anymore. So they would be presenting the panel would present, then we would take questions, and ideally the best way to do this is, according to the Peace Institute, would be people to submit questions in advance and they would get answered. And then if there's time, we would take some more questions from the audience. We would ask people to RSVP, and there would be they're creating a registration form for people to fill out so that we have a little more structure to who's attending. The publicity for it would certainly include the 102, 103 mailing list. That whole mailing list is very key to this whole project, but we could also expand it to others. I'm not quite sure how, I guess we're open for suggestions about how many others and where we draw the line for people. And then it's going to be a limited amount of space, so we can't have 800 people come to this meeting. And I'm still a little nervous about the remote capability at the synagogue. I've got a couple mixed reports whether that's available. So, but again, maybe with some kind of recording capability, we could at least get it recorded. But that's an issue that still that's unresolved. We don't have any other places that we can go. We can convene a meeting in our neighborhood. So, and initially, we were thinking we didn't want to go down to CB7, to their meeting space, because that involves travel for too many of our people. The people who care about this issue live between, say 105 and 101, and certainly in this neighborhood, and they're not going to go down to 87th Street. So that's where it stands now. And hopefully, the whole goal is for us to come to a better spirit between our neighbors who are passionate about this project, either passionate for or against it. And it's not healthy for us to be fighting over this issue, quite frankly. So we are trying to find a way where we can bring down the temperature, where maybe we can all come up with some nice compromises. Maybe we can convince everybody that this is a temporary project and it'll be fine and we'll see how it works. And after a year, if it's not working, if it's still causing problems, we might, because that was the initial proposal that was voted on by CB7, that it was temporary. Maybe there'll be some even new ideas that would come out of all of this coming together and meeting. But I think it's important for DOT to really hear, because they haven't been aware of all the stuff that's been going on in the last 6 months. Gail Brewer is, because people call her, but they don't, they're not, DOT is in its own little world. So that doesn't mean that they are, inflexible, but I don't think they're privy to what the tensions are. So the idea of this would be to, kind of get things out there, let the beginnings of the pros and cons, and we'll see where we are. So I guess what I'm throwing out to folks here is, does July 6th sound like it could work as a date? Peter?
Works for me, and thank you, Cynthia. CB7 is an absolutely critical participant. That's all I have to say about that. And I welcome peace. I welcome impartial discussion, fact-based discussion, but yet people who are organizing this have to talk to everybody, not just one side. And that includes me, as you just mentioned.
Peter, I'm sure it won't be impartial. We'll all be very partial. That's the reason for meeting. So, Cynthia, I'm not sure that I understand when you say DOT and Peter and Maxine or me. DOT, if it's 2 hours, does DOT present for 1 hour or for 2 hours? When do we provide it?
Yeah, I think they don't have to do a whole hour. I think they should do a half an hour, or actually, I mean, it should be evenly divided. I don't know. Maybe let DOT speak for half an hour, and then 15 minutes for Peter and 15 minutes for you or Maxine. Does that sound like a good division?
Well, it's possible, but what I'm concerned about is Peter just said CB7 needs to be there. So if we have DOT and Peter and CB7 and us, that's a little bit unbalanced, which I understand, but then we want some balance in terms of people and time. If there are two sides as opposed to many sides, then the one side of the seesaw is DOT and Peter and CB7.
Well, my vision of CB7 is only that they would recount what happened. There was a proposal presented to the transportation, no, I forget which committee it went to first. Then it went to the full board. I think that's all CB7 has to say.
Well,
to talk about the vote.
Let me point out that CB7 includes some people who are from transportation alternatives, and they're basically lobbyists, and they are very upfront about it.
Right, but
They don't
CB7 is
present
made up of
themselves
50
as a-
people.
Excuse me?
Isn't this something that the peace folks should be doing? That is, talking to each of the people who are going to participate in this, ask them how much time they need in order to be able to do justice to their point of view on this stuff to get this going. and to agree on what the rules are going to be for the presentations and the discussion afterwards. They should be taking the lead on this, but I was surprised to hear that DOT hadn't even been contacted by them. And Peter hadn't, and Herb, I don't know if you'd been contacted by them.
Gary, I absolutely agree with you. And every time I've tried to contact the Peace Institute, they push me off like it's Cynthia's job, and I don't think it is Cynthia's job.
Yeah.
So I can't get any definition. I couldn't get any kind of commitments. I have emails. I mean, they're really kind of meaningless. So that's what I think their job is. They're the mediators. They should figure out what's going to work.
Okay, and I do know that we have now talked to DOT, so, and I think the July 6th date was good for them. They were thinking it was still tomorrow. And apparently, we're planning to attend tomorrow.
Well, it's far enough away that it seems like it's a reasonable lead time. But I think that Gary's point is the important one. We have to get Peace Institute to pick up the ball and talk to each side or each party and figure out how to fit it together.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what do we need them for?
I agree.
Okay, so I'll pass that on to them.
I have a question. I mean, could it be that the panelists, we know, like if say it's Peter and Herb, just for example, Peter and Herb, DOT, CB7, DOT and CB7 are there more for informational, as Cynthia said, kind of background or details, but not advocacy one way or the other. And Peter and Herb are more representative of the groups who want to see the open street go ahead and be a permanent thing, and the groups who don't. Would that work? Would that be acceptable?
Well, it might look like that to you, but that's not how it looks to me.
Well, what
Okay,
if
DOT
we ask them to be that way? I mean, we're sponsoring this, we're paying for the room. In a sense, we're responsible for it. So what if we presented that as that's how we would like it to work?
I'm trying to say to you that that's unacceptable, okay? So
Alright.
if you let me finish.
Yeah.
From what I said, DOT has a plan. It's supported by CB7, and Peter is aligned with it. Perfectly reasonable. I'm not complaining about that. And then there are those of us who live here who object to that plan. So it's, there are 4 parties at the table, and 3 of them are on one side of the table. And I'm trying to get it to be a little bit more balanced.
Well, Herb, what do you want? Do you want more time, or what do you want?
It might be more time, it might be more people. I mean, instead of me being alone, it might be 2 more people.
Don't forget them to, that this is kind of the conversation you ought to be having with Herb and others. And I mean, it may be that Peter also feels that there ought to be some other people presenting the reasons why this is going to be a great boon to the neighborhood. And so why not can't we ask them to take this on and discuss with each of you and come up with a schedule?
I absolutely agree with you. I'd like the Peace Institute to figure this out and not to dictate to them what the format, what the configuration should be.
Yeah.
Right, but this wasn't going to be a panel of 10 people. That's not the point of this. This is supposed to be the information session, and for DOT to hear what's out there.
Well, DOT is not going to hear very much if the other parties in the room are CB7 and Peter. Okay.
You don't think you can talk?
No, what I'm saying is,
Persuasively?
if you want DOT to hear something, then give me half the session. Okay, but what you're describing is I get a sliver and you expect it to be equal, and I don't think that's. And I think I want to take Gary's point. I think that the mediators, who should be professionals at this kind of thing, should be able to figure out the shape of the table. I'd like to push it back on them.
I think
Okay.
Richard wants to say something. He's got his hand up.
Yeah, I've had my hand up for a while. So I think this conversation, I agree with Gary, this isn't a conversation we should be having. This is a conversation that needs to be had with the Peace Institute. If they're coming in to play this role, this is a big part of what they'd be doing. And I think that there's the question of how is this meeting structured? And this is what they do. None of us knows their process. Hopefully they know their process. Need to let them run their process and know how to structure this meeting. That said, I think that there's been some miscommunication between them and other parties about who's responsible for different parts of it. And because of that, the meeting had been scheduled for tomorrow with some vital players not even being aware that the meeting had been scheduled. So that's getting fixed, but moving forward, there are some really key questions about, who's owning this meeting? What role does each entity have in scheduling the meeting and communicating the meeting, in structuring the meeting? And that needs to be very clear so that we don't run into the same issue again. You need a very clear understanding of what the agenda is. A big question about what the role of the public is. As I heard what Cynthia said, that a big part of this meeting is to be able to hear from the public and hear concerns that the public has. But I also heard you say that the only role for the public is to ask questions, not to state opinions. So that's something we should know in advance, and that any communication should make very clear to members of the public. You can come here, ask questions in advance, and if your question is selected, you'll get it answered. Is very, very different than a meeting where you can come here, sign up to speak, and have 60 or 90 or 120 seconds to state your viewpoint. And we need to understand what the role of the meeting is, how the public will be engaged, what the facilitation process is, and who's managing that. And I put in an email a lot of questions I have. I think we need to get those questions answered so that everyone goes into this with a really clear understanding of how it's going to work. Because otherwise, I think people are going to be disappointed, or it's not going to work in the intended way. I'm sure if Gail's choosing this organization, she's worked with them and she knows that they can be really effective at this. I think we just need to understand how they're working.
Okay, so, and I passed all of your comments on to the Peace Institute this afternoon. So I think we're trying to answer those questions. It's being facilitated and owned, if you want, by the Peace Institute. The Block Association is paying for the space and will help with circulating the publicity to our members. The Peace Institute will be circulating more flyers and notices, and will be asking for what other groups, who else should be being sent those flyers. So I will be talking to them tomorrow, I guess, and we'll try to get some of these answers, and I'll get them to be clearer about how we do the division of speaking time.
And Cynthia, I would appreciate a little more communication.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then the other consideration is how much time we have before the meeting so we can publicize it properly. So the soonest you guys can really secure that date, the better.
Right. So that's, but I think we have potential for doing much better on that, since today is June
12th.
12th, and we're talking about July 6th. So I think we should have enough lead time to get our ducks in order on that.
And just a final thing is, I know a lot of synagogues have streaming capabilities. Is that something we could tap into it? Anshe Hesed, do they have someone who runs it? Because if we're doing this hybrid, we'd want someone with more experience who knows how to really do a production of allowing people to speak from, if we're letting members of the public speak remotely, we need to make sure we've got things set up the right way.
Right, well, I think we did ask on that for the meeting tomorrow. I'm not sure that I got the clear resolution of that. So, because there was some discussion that they can't really do anything remote. But let me clarify that.
My co-op had their annual meeting there in one of the rooms, and we were able to use a Zoom function so people could zoom in. There were some technical glitches at the beginning, just getting the speakers right and everything else, but there certainly was internet capability and people were able to zoom in.
Do you know if
Okay,
you
good.
use their equipment or if your co-op brought in equipment?
I can find out. I'll ask.
Great.
Okay, I
Uh,
think we have a plan.
Could I just add one other thing on this? I sent a note around, and I won't try to duplicate it, but I always get worried about these kinds of meetings being flooded by people who aren't either residents of the area directly impacted by it or have other interests in mind that they're trying to promote by opposing or supporting these kinds of things. And I think it's really important that the Peace Institute also have some rules about people identifying themselves when they're speaking at this organization, as many community boards do these days, and others. So perhaps you could raise that also with the Peace Institute, and make sure that they're going to actually do something about this.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I think both groups are suspicious of others, dominating the conversation. And by others, it's, whoever we think, but it really should be, I mean, that was how it all began, when we were struggling over the survey. We wanted, we really were trying our survey to be for the members of and residents of the Block Association, and that created all kinds of challenges on how to do a survey that would really circulate and that people would actually read. And it turns out once the DOT started doing some work, all of a sudden we found out people were not even aware that there had been a survey, even though they are Block Association members. So it's, I always remember I had a controversy with actually Rochelle Stearns, who lives at 870, yeah. And she was all upset about a notice for a meeting, one of our political meetings probably, that she hadn't been aware of. And I went right in the lamppost, right smack in front of the front door, had a bright yellow neon sign announcing the post. It was a poster about the meeting. So, it's hard to say why people get information. I think probably it's the frequency of it. And on this particular planning thing, we just weren't sending enough information out. So if we can focus on July 6th, I think we can spread the word, and we can, I'll talk to the Peace Institute about trying to, I think when people do speak, they should clarify where they live or if they're workers who come in. I mean, we have to allow some of our porters and supers to have an opinion, because parking does affect them. And I think they care also about the look of the street. So, but I'll pass all this information on. I'll talk with Peace Institute tomorrow, and hopefully we can move things along fairly quickly. Okay? Everybody happy?
Cynthia, 2 points about what you just said. One is that you said that the survey hadn't been well enough communicated, and there were 190 people who did respond to it. So, undoubtedly there were some folks who didn't know about it, but we did have
We have 1,200 households in the block association.
Richard, we have
But how many
600
people-
signatures of people who
So
object.
let me have the floor for a sec. So, I mean, it's a question of how many people fill out surveys, and that's not a small number. There also, when you raise concerns about whether people from outside the block might have voted in the survey, there was a pretty ornate system to prevent that was in effect. So I think just all of us need to be careful about making statements that are judgmental when they, when they're subjective.
All right, no more subjection from me. I'm ready to call for a motion to adjourn. It's 9:16, so we almost did it in an hour and a quarter. Hetty, are you saying something?
I forgot that I had muted. Before we adjourn, I'd like to say, Cynthia, thank you for all the effort you've been putting in on this. I know it's not something you had probably budgeted the time for on behalf of the Block Association, so thanks for doing it. And I am very encouraged by the more constructive tone of our meeting tonight. So thank you all who contributed to that. Done. And I'd like to second your motion to adjourn.
I think that people in Chinatown might be disappointed that there weren't more fireworks.
Oh, wait until we get to the synagogue.
All right.
I'm
Thanks all.
sure we can't do fireworks at the synagogue. That would be,
Frowned
Homeland
upon.
Security would be in there very quickly.
Not kosher.
All right.
All right.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you,
everyone.
everybody. Have a good night.
Yes, thank you.